Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's edition of Fabrication Friday. Hope you're doing well. This week we're picking back up with our series on building a welding fabrication table for my home shop. Um, at this point, nearly everything is ready to go. All of our parts are cut, all of our pieces are put together. It's just a matter of putting everything together into a finished product. So thanks for sticking with me through this three-part series. It's been kind of a fun project to work on. So let's get into it. As you can see, I've gotten the frame all welded in. Pretty much everything at this point is welded solid. All right, I ended up cutting some pads out on our CNC plasma table for our casters. I got those welded on and I have the wheels attached. Now, when you start looking at casters, okay, real common thing, especially for beginners, is to just take this and weld it straight to our structure. You know, this does a couple things. First of all, it's quick and dirty and easy, but it also doesn't allow for any changes, all right? Now, I'm not exactly sure if these casters are gonna be heavy enough. If I welded them to this structure, I would likely have to ruin the caster just to get it off. By bolting it onto a pad, it makes this a lot more interchangeable. All right, which brings me to the next point. All right, if you're looking closely, you notice something wrong with this table, and that is over here. I got in a hurry, I welded the pads on, went to attach the casters, and they're going the wrong way. They really should be flipped like that. With this, I committed the cardinal sin, or one of the cardinal sins of fabrication here. I did not check my work before I made it permanent. Unfortunately now, these two pads are on more solid than the Titanic, and so I'm gonna have a lot of grinding and fixing to do there. So that's the next step. Thank goodness it's Friday. We're gonna pick it up next week. As you can see, we have made quite a bit of progress. I have to apologize for the lack of updates as we're going through this process. But I finally got the casters on and everything is set up. Now with those casters, I ended up having to cut them off, making them as square as I possibly could with an angle grinder. In the end, I ended up just going to get brand new casters. Ended up getting 4 swivels instead of 2 swivels and two stationary. I think it'll just give me a little more flexibility in using this table. But it's actually starting to look like a table, which is pretty sweet. Until we get to this point, it's always a little touch and go to see if you're actually gonna get a product done. But even better, so you remember I've been planning out my height of this to be a good work table. This jig table that I've been working on, this I have found to be about the ideal height, and as you can see, I am pretty gosh darn close. By the time we get the top on this table, we'll be right where we want to be. So we've got a mover now, so that's exciting. We're gonna go ahead and put, or start working on putting the tabletop on this table. Now, as I was sitting here thinking about what kind of top to put on this table, a couple options came to mind. First of all, most commonly, just a solid piece of flat steel. It's probably the easiest thing to do and the quickest, and perhaps even the cheapest in terms of when we start thinking about a labor perspective. However, in my opinion, it's not the most useful, right? Because so much of the time, we're looking to clamp stuff down onto the table. We're looking to move stuff around a lot. And so I took my inspiration from our fixture tables that we have in our school shop here. Okay, these are really useful. They have channels, or they have open space in between each of the bars here. You can see we've got clamps that run through those channels. We've got all sorts of these tools that go into the holes down here, okay? All sorts of fun stuff. And so I thought to myself, how can I mimic that to some extent? Now, I'm not gonna go so far as to machine a bunch of holes into this, although we could do that if we had the time and the know-how and the machinery to do it. However, I don't really want to go that deep, so I found a little bit of a unique solution. And that is using this channel iron, or channel steel. Now, this is channel steel. It's 3 inches wide by 1 inch tall. Again, this is stuff that we've just got laying around our shop. We've built a bunch of stuff out of it. We're just kind of down what's in the mode of cleaning out the last little bit. And so what we're gonna do, we're gonna cut this into pieces and use this for our tabletop. Okay, they'll be set there and they will be welded on. They'll be centered actually. Additionally, we're gonna leave some room in between each slat. So this one, this table has some room. I think it looks to be close to 1.5 inches of space. We're gonna do something similar with these. So that's the first thing. That way we can be sure to get a clamp underneath. We can clamp it around like that. It's gonna be really useful, I think. However, I was thinking, let's go a little bit deeper, because eventually what I want to do is I want to make a screen that goes all around the back and the sides of this table. All right, in our welding booths, we've got those screens. They help shield against arc flash. They shield against sparks. And so I want to use them. Over here earlier, I had built some portable ones for our own fab tables here at school. And so I wanted to do something similar to that. And so I needed a way to attach those screens. I wanted them to be detachable in case I wanted access to all sides of this. And so I punched some holes. Okay, on each end of these channels, what I'm going to end up doing is punching holes. And then, furthermore, on the back side, we're gonna put some weld nuts. Okay, we're gonna put some threaded nuts. These are 1/2 inch for 1/2 inch bolts, coarse thread. And so that way it's readily available. It's going to be heavy duty to hold down whatever we need it to. It's going to be useful for holding down our screens as well as holding down, it's just another fixture point realistically, because now any 1/2 inch bolt that we have becomes a hold down. All right, so we got a lot of work ahead of us here today. Okay, I do need to let this piece cool down. The TIG welds that I use to attach those nuts are still a little bit warm, so I want to make sure that as they cool, our threads still line up and everything's going to be kosher. But while that's cooling, I'll probably start cutting these. I got a bunch of these 29-inch lengths to cut. I've got a bunch of holes to punch. And then once we're done punching and cutting, we can go ahead and start our welding. So stay tuned for that. We'll show another video here, or we'll drop you guys back in once all this stuff is done, ready to be attached. So next we need to go about attaching all of these bars to our top. So to give you an idea of what I've done so far, I've got all these bars cut, cleaned them all up nicely, or at least where I needed to weld, punched some holes, and I welded some of these weld nuts in over the holes. Now the idea is that these holes become multifunctional, okay? Hoping they can be used as hold down points where we can actually be bolting clamps or parts down to the table to keep them from moving. Alternatively, I've got visions in my head of making a curtain framework for around the edge of this table to make kind of a mini welding booth, so to speak. And so I'm going to make those to be bolted into this as well. And so now we've got to go ahead and attach all of these to our table. And so we've got a few things we got to think about. Okay? I have just set these two on here. First of all, we need to make sure they're square and true. Okay, not only square this way, okay, where this distance is the same all the way down, right? But we also need to make sure that this length is the same or as close as we can get it on either end. We need that overhang to be equal. Okay. Thirdly, we need to make sure this space in between the bars is the same all the way across. And so that can be quite a task. Now there's a couple different ways we can do it. First of all, we can go ahead, measure everything out, mark it down, tack it on, make sure we're sticking to our marks all the way down. That's going to take a long time. Typically the more we measure, the more we mark, the more inaccuracies and more issues we're going to have with accuracy. It's just not a very repeatable motion. And so we need to figure out a way to basically repeat this same thing all the way down the table. Essentially leave, this is a 3 plus 1.5, a 4.5 inch piece each time, as well as keeping it centered left to right. And so we're going to create some tools. We're going to create a jig, all right? And that is just what I've done here. Okay, I took some scrap square tubing and scrap angle iron and just made a little jig. So the way this works is we take this flat, or we take the square tubing laid across the top. This angle iron will butt up tight against the outer edge of our frame. Then we can take our panel steel or our bars, line them up tight, okay, hold them tight to this edge, hold them tight to this edge, make sure it's slapped up against the table tight, and now we have a simple repeatable thing to be able to tack this in place all the way down the table. All right, so that's going to be the next steps. We're going to end up starting with this table. When I was cutting these and designing this, I designed it so that it would be flush with the edge like so, and then just all the way down. So we'll end up tacking this one in place based off the edge, and then we'll use our little jig system here all the way down to the end. If my calculations are right, we should end up right at the edge of the table, maybe a hair short, but I've got other designs for that as well. So hopefully we end up maybe an inch, 2 inches short down at that end. And now it's starting to finally look like a table here. So as you can see, I went ahead and I got the top all tacked up. I got all the top bars put on, and now it is ready to be welded solid. So I wanted to tack everything on before welding it just to make sure that everything is going to line up and be okay. And actually lined up better than I thought it would. So as I mentioned, I had a little plan here for the end, for one of the ends. I'm gonna go over here and I'll show you. I started over here. I put this first bar flush with the edge of our table. Kept going all the way over here at the end. I ended up with a little short segment here. It was nearly exactly 3 inches wide. Kind of a half happy accident, half designed calculation. When I was calculating out how many of these bars I needed, I realized I was gonna have exactly 3 inches left over. And so what I did was I took one of these 1x3 channels and I basically flipped it upside down. One of the things that I really dislike about working with one of these tables is the fact that there's nowhere to put small supplies, so like markers, pens, extra contact tips, extra supplies, tape measures. When I'm using our school tables like this, I always find that those things end up falling underneath in that big mess, and I got to go hunting for them. So hopefully this will give me a place to put all that stuff where it won't run away. So now what I need to do is I need to end up going through and making sure everything is still square and true. The camera, through the camera, it looks like this table is sagging in the middle just a little bit. I'm about 99% sure that's simply the camera perspective, that's just what it looks like, but I am going to double check that because if we need to add some more supports in the middle, we will. It's just a matter of putting those in. And so before I weld all this stuff solid, I'm going to make sure that everything else is square and true, because at this point all it takes is a good hammer hit, okay, with our big 5-pound maul there, to knock these loose. Once they're welded solid, they ain't coming up no matter what we do to it, short of grinding it out. So stay tuned for that. Next we'll be welding, checking. We're in the final stages here, folks. And that's a wrap. Hopefully you guys have all enjoyed seeing this project from start to finish. One of those things where I wasn't able to show as much of the welding detail and setting up a welder as I maybe would have liked, but that's okay. Hopefully this has given you some ideas for stuff you can build at home. If you do have questions or you do have ideas or things you'd like me to show you next, hit me up in the comments below. I have been trying to keep these videos a little bit shorter. The last couple weeks have gotten just a hair longer than I would like, because let's be honest, no one wants to sit for much more than 10-15 minutes watching someone talk to them on YouTube. So with that, have a great Fabrication Friday. See you next week.